Welcome to the latest in the Compliance Factory's series of conversations about money laundering. My name is Adam Samuel, and I'm with Malachy McClelland, a remediation specialist. We thought we'd take things back to the beginning, to customer due diligence, particularly the first job in practice in anti-money laundering work. And those of you who like following these things through the fourth and the fifth money laundering directive, we're talking articles 10 to 14 of the fourth directive as amended by the fifth one for customer due diligence, then 15 to 17 of a simplified due diligence, and then 18 through to the end of the chapter 24 deals with enhanced due diligence. The obvious place to start is to ask, what is customer due diligence?
Well, firms are required under the regulations to have client due diligence and to know who their customers are. So they will identify and verify the identity of an individual customer, for example. If it's an entity, then they will need to know who the beneficial owners and controllers are behind that entity. And as part of the client due diligence, they would be required to have ongoing monitoring of the transactions and the client activity.
So when do you have to do this?
Well, you do it before you take the client on, so at onboarding, at other times, such as periodic reviews, if there's any money laundering or terrorist financing risk identified, at various stages, if there are certain levels of transactions being carried out, there'll be a requirement to carry out further client due diligence. And if there's any suggestion that the material and information they have on file is not up to date or has not been properly verified, then the firm should carry out further due diligence.
So what are the practical tasks involved on a day-to-day basis?
Well, as I say, when you're taking on a client, you're required to obtain, you'll obtain documentation around the client and do online checks where necessary, and carry out screening. Now, the firm should have an automated screening system to check for whether there's any politically exposed persons, whether there are any sanctions connections, or whether there's any adverse media around the client, and do this on an ad hoc basis, and do it on a manual basis when you're actually onboarding the client or throughout the relationship.
So what's this simplified due diligence? What is it and when do you do it?
Well, again, simplified due diligence is still around the requirement to carry out due diligence on the client. So firms will risk rate their clients and monitor their clients on a risk-based basis. They will, if they find that the client is of lower risk and they establish that the client is lower risk, then they may carry out what is commonly called simplified due diligence. Now, that would be applied, for example, to a firm that is is regulated, for example, in this country. Firm can establish that the client is regulated. It may then be able to carry out simplified due diligence.
And then enhanced due diligence, is that simplified due diligence lower ranking to customer due diligence, and enhanced due diligence a higher ranking, a higher level of due diligence?
Well, yes. I mean, the firms will look again at the client risk rating, and if the client is risk rated as high risk, then it will carry out further due diligence. Now, that might mean doing further checks on the beneficial owner or the individual client. It could require enhanced due diligence around the monitoring of the client. If other areas of high risk are identified, such as politically exposed persons or sanctions, then the firm will have to carry out further enhanced due diligence.
And the location of a client can also kick in here to force your due diligence up from standard or customer due diligence up to enhanced as well?
Well, that would form, the location would form part of the risk rating in the first place. But yes, if it is established that a client that there's some high risk jurisdiction connection that wasn't already identified, then yes, that would be one aspect that would require enhanced due diligence, as would any identified risk around money laundering or terrorist financing.
So what goes wrong with this?
Well, maybe where the firms haven't risk weighted their clients in the first place, that can create problems where, for example, if a client is classed as low risk, but something has been missed, that could lead to problems where the client hasn't been properly risk weighted, where there aren't sufficient independent information, where there isn't independent information on file, so that you haven't properly verified the client in the first place, or where you've obtained all this information but it's not accessible, or you haven't recorded it properly.
Thank you very much. I suppose before we leave, we ought to at least show you where we did our homework from. And so just a quick run through before we say goodbye, if you like. This is the customer due diligence provisions of the 4th Money Laundering Directive, and starting with Article 10. And you could, there's simplified customer due diligence, enhanced customer due diligence, and that will take us through to the end of the chapter, the end of our video today. Thank you very much.